Okay, so inverse trig functions, day one. It's basically just making sure you remember most of those ordered pairs as we go through, and the ones that you don't know, that you know how to draw a picture. So when you see inverse sine of -1, make sure you know that means you're looking for the angle. What angle has a sine of -1? So think about the unit circle. That's the y value on the unit circle. Inverse sine has to go between pi/2 and -pi/2. So sine is negative down here. So to name that angle, we have to name it as -pi/2. You don't want to name it as 3pi/2 because that's not in my range of answers. -pi/2. Number 2, inverse cosine of -2/2. On the unit circle, we focus on cosine in the first and the second, between 0 and pi. So what angle has a cosine, an x value of -2/2? Well, that has a reference angle of pi/4. So in the second quadrant, that would be 3pi/4. All right, number 3, inverse sine of -3/2. Again, that's down here in the fourth quadrant because we have to focus here. Sine is negative down here. The y value is -3/2. So that means the x value is 1/2. That is at -pi/3. Number 4, inverse tan. The tan are usually the ones I have a hard time thinking about. Tangent is, again, in between -pi/2 and pi/2, like the sine. So I do know it's negative down here. So if you need to draw the picture, you can. But with this one, you're thinking of the ratio of x to y being 1:1. Because remember, tangent is y/x. So that ratio is in a ratio of 1, which means they have to be the same. Well, what angle has the same x and the same y? That's -pi/4. So that one you wouldn't have to draw a picture of. You could know that, okay, x and y have to be the same. All right, number 5. Cotangent, again, I don't really know cotangent. I know it's x/y. So when I go to draw the picture, it's negative. Cotangent is like the cosine. It's between 0 and pi. So it's negative over here. This one I don't know, so this one I usually draw the picture of. I would say x is -3, the y is 3, and if I use Pythagorean theorem, take -3 squared plus 3 squared is r squared. This would be 3 plus 9 is 12, so r is the square root of 12, and that's radical 4 times radical 3, so that's 2 radical 3. That's the r value. Now that still doesn't tell me what angle it is, but now I can sit and think that the cosine of this angle, the cosine of the angle I'm looking at, I'll call it theta, is the x value over the r value. And now I see that the radical 3's cancel, so the cosine is -1/2. So what angle has a cosine of -1/2, and then the y value would end up being radical 3/2? That is at a reference angle of pi/3. So that's 2pi/3. Okay, so I did have to draw a picture, and then I think about cosine or sine to help me answer that question. All right, cosecant. Cosecant's reciprocal to sine. So when you see this, it's really saying the inverse sine. If this is -1/1, it's 1/-1. So I'm really asking also, what angle has a sine of -1? Well, the angle that has a sine of -1 is -pi/2. So all you're really doing with the secant, cosecant is thinking about the reciprocal. All right, secant, inverse secant. So that really means I'm looking for the inverse cosine of 3/2 radical 3. All right, I don't know what that one is, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to rationalize the denominator. I'm going to multiply by radical 3 over radical 3. So I'm going to get inverse cosine of 3 radical 3 over 2 times 3. I multiply these together and I get square root of 9, which is 3. 2 times 3 is 6. I still don't recognize that ordered pair, but I do know that 3 goes into there once, 3 goes into there twice. So I'm looking for inverse cosine of radical 3 over 2. So without drawing the picture even, I just knew that I was looking for inverse cosine, so I had to kind of simplify that to find out it was inverse cosine of radical 3 over 2. So what angle has a cosine of radical 3 over 2? That would be pi over 6. All right, number 8. Again, it's a secant. So that's saying inverse cosine of negative 1/2. So what angle has a cosine? Cosine, remember, is in the first or second quadrant. So we're in the second quadrant. Cosine is negative 1/2. That's the x value. So if I go negative 1/2 over and radical 3 over 2 up, that is going to be that reference angle of pi over 3. So it's 2 pi over 3. Inverse tan of 0, 0 over 1. So again, I'm looking for the angle that has a y value of 0, x value of 1, or that they're in that ratio. So when you draw that picture, x is 1, y is 0. That happens right there, and that will be 0. 0 radians. That's when y is 0 and x is 1. The tangent, the y over the x, is 0 at that spot. And then the last one, inverse cotangent of radical 3. Cotangent is like the cosine. It's negative, so it's in the second. This one I would have to draw a picture for. This is x over y. So x is negative radical 3. Y is 1. So if I take negative radical 3 squared plus 1 squared, I get 3 plus 1 is 4. So r is going to be the square root of 4, which is 2. So that's the r value. Whoops, I guess I could move that up a little bit for you. So that's the r value, 2. And so now I know that the sine is 1/2, cosine is negative radical 3 over 2. So that's a reference angle of pi over 6. So that will be 5 pi over 6. Okay, so that's the front page. Draw pictures when you need to, if it's some of those trig functions you don't know. Otherwise, it's just a matter of knowing which quadrant you're in and then naming that ordered pair for sine and cosine. Okay, on the back is just making sure you can use your calculator. So it does say to make sure you're in radians. So when you go to your calculator, make sure that you go to mode and make sure you're in radian mode. All right, and so when you want to do something like inverse cosine of 0.6, you're just going to hit the inverse cosine button, 0.6. It's going to give you a radian measure back because we're looking for an angle. It says I'm supposed to round to the nearest hundredth of a radian, so this one's going to be 0.93. Nothing too different with the second one. Is inverse sine of 1/8. So now I hit inverse sine of 1 divided by 8, and I get 0.13. Rounded to the nearest hundredth. Tangent, same thing, inverse tan, so I hit second tan of negative 3. I get negative 1.25. Negative 1.25. Alright, inverse cosine of radical 2 over 3. So I'm going to hit inverse cosine of radical 2. Make sure you get that you don't have the divided by 3 under the radical. Inverse cosine of radical 2 over 3 is 1.08. Alright, and then when I get to these, now you have to remember that inverse. So when I see inverse secant, I have to remember that the reciprocal of that, I'm really looking for the inverse cosine of 1/4. So if I want to know what angle has a secant of 4, it's the same angle that has a cosine of 1/4. So now I just go inverse cosine of 1 divided by 4. And I get 1.32. Alright, inverse cotangent. I'm going to do inverse tan of negative 2 over 1. Because again, I don't have an inverse cotangent, so I have to do inverse tan. Now, when I do inverse tan, though, we have a problem. Inverse tan of, what was it, negative 2? I get negative 1.11. Okay, that's the answer this gives me, negative 1.11. Now, the problem becomes that is not in my range of answers for cotangent. Cotangent is negative up here in the second quadrant. So now what I have to realize is that the calculator is giving me the tangent. Tangent, remember, is between the first and the fourth. So now when I have an inverse tan of a number, -2, I got an angle of -1.11. So that's saying that in the fourth quadrant, that's the reference angle of -1.11. I, though, need to have that same reference angle in the second quadrant for cotangent. So I need to take 3.14, take away that -1.11, or take -1.11 and add pi. I get 2.03. So that's the only one that's really tricky. You have to make sure that when you use inverse tan, if you're a negative, you have a negative angle, you have to make sure for cotangent you add that pi to get back up to there. Alright, inverse cosecant, that means it's the inverse sine of -3/4. So I do inverse sine of -3/4, and I get -0.85. This is -0.85. And then again, the last one, inverse secant, means inverse cosine has to be -1/10. So on the calculator, I do second cosine of -1/10, and I get 1.67. So really the only tricky one was up here with this tangent. You've got to be careful of inverse tan. Okay?